Welcome back. If you've just joined us, you're watching Newslink on DSTV channel 403. Now, the final state capture report is critical of President Cyril Ramaphosa and the State Security Agency. It found Ramaphosa could have done more and that if the State Security Agency had done its job, it would have been able to investigate elements of state capture. For more on this, we're joined by Head of Law at Regenesys Business School, Mr. Kevin Malunga. Advocate, good morning and thank you very much for your time.
Good morning,
Your
Fundo.
take on the state capture report, because many now, if we look, are saying or asking the question, has the report laid enough of a foundation for the law enforcement agencies to eventually effect arrests and actually win prosecutions?
Oh, absolutely. There's been a lot of spade work that has been done. I did say in another forum that I did advise when I was still Deputy Public Protector, the Commission, when it started, that look, forensics is going to be your big scorecard. In other words, if you investigate somebody, if you're accusing Fundo of something, at least make sure you've got backup. In other words, forensic evidence to prove it, and I think they've done a fairly good job of that, and gathering the material. So I think 80% of the work is done for the law enforcement agencies. They really have to just take that baton and run with it. I think historically the big challenge with a lot of these agencies is that they themselves have been captured, as it were. So if the decision makers had no appetite to do things, which is what the report is actually showing, that the State Security Agency is an agency to protect the people of this country from internal and external threats, but it became a threat. It's on its own. So
it was completely
really
hollowed out.
Yes.
But then on another forum, I heard you raising concern, though, at the price tag and the pace at which the Commission had moved. You are somebody that felt that there could have been preservation orders that were effected a bit earlier because people now have had the opportunity, 4 years later, to hide away their funds.
Oh yes, there have been a few preservation orders. I think in the Free State, for example, there's a few that have already gone underway. I think I'm not sure whether it's the Estina or the other asbestos one, but there have been there has been that kind of activity, and I think 1 billion is too much for this information. That's one thing that I have the highest regard for Raymond Zondo. But I think it's a question of the mechanisms and systems in place that were there to do this. It becomes a big bureaucracy. You have a lot of lawyers. Unfortunately, I'm a lawyer
and
myself.
They don't come cheap. They don't come cheap.
Yes,
they're out of their chambers. I mean, if they're not in their chambers,
yes, I remember,
then they're going to bill you for that.
Absolutely. I remember when we started the Marikana Commission, of which I was part of at the beginning, we had to negotiate how much we're going to pay them per day. So I think it's been the case in this regard. And I'm not casting aspersions on what lawyers need to do. Lawyers need to do what they have to do. But there were forensics, there were all sorts of other people. And I think too many open-ended timelines. And I think this is one thing that Parliament and other stakeholders need to put their foot down and say, look, in future, when we have a commission, this is how it works. They have to probably amend the Commissions Act, which is a 1955 or 1965 piece of legislation. So I think it really is something that is good for democracy in terms of accountability and asserting South Africa as a country where the rule of law works. However, I think the bill and, of course, the aspect of consequence management. In other words, what is going to happen with all these recommendations? You've got about 200 pages of recommendations. So will they just remain recommendations? And I think the question is in the appetite.
Yes.
For many years, the elephant in the room has been about the agencies themselves that have been at the center of this. A lot of them knew these things, to be honest with you. Some of the things that were coming out of the commission, when I was in the role of investigative role, you'd get whistleblowers coming to tell you these things. So they're not new things.
Even the media had reported
yes,
on
even
most
the media
yes.
has reported on many of this. So they're not new. And time is of the essence. I mean, when the Guptas, for example, were no longer bankable, the banks were starting to freeze their assets and etc. and their amount, and they said, no, we can't bank with you. They got a lot of time to leave the country, That shouldn't have happened in a law enforcement system that is on top of it. But then the appetite, political will is an issue. I remember when we visited Singapore many years ago, and we asked them, why are you guys so successful in fighting corruption? They said the big issue is political will. So now when the fish is rotten at the top, from the head, then nothing will happen.
But law enforcers that are listening to our conversation now could easily say you're unfair. If you're saying they should have been prevented from leaving the country, they could easily have said, but as men of the law, we had nothing that could keep them in the country at the time. We would have had to produce a charge sheet to say, we're now effecting an arrest and you're charged for this. So at the time, they could have said we had no capacity to follow through and effect an arrest. So they had to flee, or they were in a position to leave.
Well, the argument has been that the people in charge at the time, NPA, etc., also had no appetite, So they were. So as I said, it's another unresolved discussion as to the extent to which law enforcement itself was captured. Because if you have, if you look at the report, when he's talking about the state security agency and prosecutions being stopped and this and that, so there was manipulation of that. And there's I love all this African saying which says you don't have to invite flies to food, They know when it's time to eat.
When food is being served.
When it's easy pickings. And everybody could see that the systems are weak. And they just went in for the kill. From the SOEs, the presses, the transnets, to all the various elements of state. Remember, what people are forgetting, and I think what Zondo may not have emphasized enough, based on my previous life doing these investigations, that this kind of corruption eats into service delivery that should be delivering for you. So all this stuff about load shedding and coal and whatever, that's all hogwash. This is about mismanaged organizations, which shouldn't have these problems if they were managed properly. If you look at PRASA and the trains, etc. Yes.
And that's an important point that you raise. But if you look at social media now, it seems some people have state capture fatigue, if you will. Are you not disheartened by the fact that people fail to locate their suffering in all of this, that if there is load shedding, it's as a result of mismanagement at Eskom, that today you're also being charged a bit more, that if there's an increase in tariffs that Eskom is asking for, it's because it's been funding a build project that has inflated its prices and is never ending. So it does affect them, but it seems everybody's going on and saying, no, you know what, we're tired of state capture. Are you not disheartened by the sentiment that you're seeing?
Well, I've seen the faces of those suffering Gogos in deep rural shanty towns, etc. So I know the face of suffering. And I think that's the discussion that is not being had as a result of all this abuse of resources. I mean, if public procurement in this country worked optimally, in other words, if people procured goods and services efficiently and the state got value for its money, this would be a sparkling sort of economy. Everything would work like clockwork. There wouldn't be a single pothole in this country.
Correct.
Yeah, but now because of the narrative that Zondo has brought into the picture and quite capably described, a lot of services are in decline. Let me give you examples. What happens with the middle class and sadly, me and you are probably part of that brigade. People, as a result of failure of state services, they migrate. They go to private schools. They outsource what is a security function of the police, and they get security guards at their home.
Yes.
They get private medical aid instead of using state hospitals. And in countries that efficiently run their finances, public facilities are just as good as your private sector facilities. So that's a discussion I think that will probably have to come out of this whole entire thing, to say, look, what happens as a result of failure to use state resources optimally? And I think it's been a very, very sad conversation over the years, because then you see what happens to these people. I mean, if you look at, it may not have been, the big part of the Zondo report. Look at the asbestos thing, where not even a single house was built. But look at the Stina dairy, which is mentioned in the report, and the funds there were used to pay for a wedding. You know, the Gupta wedding. So clearly, it's so brazen, it's cruel, it's immoral. We're not saying, and I think what people must understand is that, you know, enterprise is a good thing. We're not saying people shouldn't be entrepreneurial. We're not saying people shouldn't make money properly. But we're saying they should deliver services, they should earn it, they should also they should be value for the state. And of course, a big elephant in the room for Zondo himself is that, you know, the Office of the Chief Justice, of which I was an integral part of the creation of from the beginning, has also found itself in all sorts of tender shenanigans.
Oh yes, the most recent, with its directors now, with the executives actually resigning to start their own company.
Absolute brazen corruption. I mean,
javelin of the highest order. Of the highest order, but we understand that they're investigating, but also that Reuters also has decided to suspend that contract because they're also investigating.
I mean, we worked, I remember at the Office of Public Protector, we worked on that whole thing of case management and one of the projects that we started when I was at the Office of the Chief Justice is saying quarter-next mediation, electronic filing, etc. That thing is so rampant all over the world. You can get suppliers at the click of a finger. So I don't buy that whole thing of saying, oh, it was a niche market, whatever. No.
But that one talks to some sort of a lacuna in law, because the three were executives, very competent individuals who studied that the only way we would be prohibited from doing business with Reuters is if we were still under the employ of the OCJ, but they were no longer. They ensured that, and they stated, if you remember, one of their spokesperson actually stated that the first time we will receive any remuneration is outside of the employ of the OCJ, so we have done nothing wrong.
But
so clearly they capitalized on a gap in law.
Yes, but they actually violated Treasury regulations. They actually fought against Treasury. When Treasury opposed it, they went ahead at the same time. And of course, there are a lot of things that it's just unacceptable. It doesn't look good, for starters, for an integrity organization such as the Chief Justice. So I think he needs to deal with that. I don't think he has any choice in the matter, because the main reason why that institution was created was to make it independent from all the state and executive shenanigans. So if they then do the same things, then what was the point? So it's really... and I have the highest regard for Raymond Zondo. I think he's a fit and proper person to be Chief Justice, but he also needs to clean his own house to say, look, this is how we're going to do things so that people believe in us when we talk.
Then talk to me about the report being critical of key figures. You've got the president, the current sitting president, President Ramaphosa, being found wanting himself insofar as his strategy. He says we mustn't construe his approach as complicit, as somebody who was complicit in what was happening. But many are critical of that, let me watch and wait for my turn and then effect change. What do you make of that type of an approach that the president opted to go for?
Well, and I did say at another forum, I get his approach politically, but not legally. Legally, he was obviously flawed. You know, he had to... politically, it would have been suicide for him to stick his head out. Remember, the president has a very great latitude and prerogative to fire the deputy president anytime he wants. You recall that President Begi fired then Deputy President Zuma. You don't need to explain anything. So I suspect that obviously he had to hedge his bets and saw that, look, if I stick my head out here, I'm gone. And of course, so and this is definitely not to defend what he did. What I'm saying is he wanted to be president, and I think for him. So
was it not self-preservation here?
Oh, yes, of course,
because there are those that are critical and saying you know what, if you oppose something, you need to be vociferous in that opposition. It must be seen by others. But when you're sitting and waiting for your turn, yes, it could be a strategy, but many can misunderstand or misread that as a strategy of yours and think, no, it was okay? Because we've seen a lot of ministers that move from one president to the other, having looked the other way when wrong was committed.
Oh yes, even some of those guys who are integral part of the former administration are also now part of the current one. So even right now, this thing is a political powder keg for him, in the sense, how does he deal with it? Because some of the people who are fingered are also part of his now part of his administration.
Yes, and it's an elective conference here, very important here. I mean, so David Mahlobo has been fingered in the state security matters. So what does he do? Because we've also seen, you're a legal man, you know the whole strategy of kicking for touch, where they quickly have the matter reviewed and then they're safe. And then we have to allow the law to take its course. The court roll is full. What happens in that respect?
Well, he's in a catch-22 again. Because remember, some of the fingered constituency are also delegates at the coming conference. so he's damned if he does, he's damned if he doesn't act in terms of. So he's mentioned 4 months and said Parliament is going to do that. So it would be sad if this would be more of the same talk and less action. I think what needs to happen is there has to be a sign that this was not a wild goose chase, and that at least there's value for money in terms of the consequences that come out of this entire commission. Because it was a lot of money. It's over R1 billion spent, and I think the strength obviously is the fact it has exposed a lot of very good information as to what needs to be fixed, and to prevent the country declining from being your typical sort of post-independence African country where the liberation movement falls apart, everything just becomes a free-for-all. So I think maybe that's the positive side of this commission, is the fact that it has asserted the principles of accountability as being sacrosanct, and that constitution is a very good constitution that makes sure there's an accountable state. The fact that you can investigate the president, the fact that you can hold people to account is a wonderful thing, and I think it's something that people must celebrate and not feel that not politicized in any way. And one of the mantras that has been going around, and I've been watching some of these people talking, whether it's the president, politicians from opposition parties, the judges themselves, everybody is saying never again will we have state capture. So now the time for them is really that for them to actually walk the talk, because they've, and interestingly, this thing is actually an asset to everybody. The opposition people use it to throw their own stones. The state says, oh, this is how good we are. The judges say, this, we've done our work. So for everyone, it looks like a win-win. But let's see if they actually walk the talk.
Let's hope they do. Mr. Malunga, thank you very much for your time.